thoughtful gardeners. Well, it's a snowy day here in central Pennsylvania in January, and we are going to be doing some winter sowing today. I would love to show you this technique. It is one of the easiest ways to start your seeds, and some of your seeds require cold stratification. So today's segment is sponsored by Botanical Interest. I'm going to tell you why I love Botanical Interest. The recent research suggests that 33 out of 33 commercial milkweeds are contaminated with pesticides. Now, as a butterfly gardener, this is not acceptable. And I love that Botanical Interest buys from local seed growers, non-GMO, and they test every lot. They make sure that their seeds do not contain pesticides. This is really important because an insecticide has been reintroduced into the nursery trade called neonics, and once it's in the seeds, it is in the plant and it goes systemic. So it's really, really important to know your seed source, and that's why I recommend you buy your seeds from Botanical Interest. We will put a link down in the comments below, and that helps support this channel. So if you love our content, support our sponsors. So Botanical Interest has wonderful seeds from local growers. In this case, we're going to be planting a monarch host called butterfly weed. This is one of the top 4 milkweeds native to my area that are most desirable to monarchs. So I love this one because it stays very short, it's not sappy, and even my bees really like this one. I would say in my own garden, I think it's great because all the pollinators love it. You can see Mr. Lynx is trying to help out today. It's a snowy day, so we're very, very annoyed if you're in the cat family. Sorry, Lynx, but at least you can say hi, right? You gonna go take a nap? All right, so Lynx has a very nice little window seat in there. So I had closed him off to record this video, and then he got mad and was crying. So if you're going to grow milkweeds, it's really important that you try, if you can, to get what's called cold stratification. These seeds require the freezing and thawing of cold winter days like today to actually get these seeds to sprout. And so one of the ways that you can pretend to be nature is either to put these in your crisper drawer for several weeks, or you can do a winter sowing technique. And let me tell you why I think this technique is the technique you're going to want to implement in your garden this year. First of all, it couldn't be easier. We're going to recycle milk and water jugs. In this case, I'm using a spring water jug. Make sure if you're reusing a container that you are putting it in warm soapy water and a drop of bleach. You're going to make sure it's completely cleaned out, and then we're going to take the top off. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to put holes in the bottom of your container. That's so you can allow the water to drain out. We want good drainage because this thing is going to get snowed on, rained on, it's going to get frozen. And I think that you're going to want to make sure that the water doesn't get in here and drown your seeds. Sorry, my office assistants are not cooperative today. They are loving the fact that it's a snow day because then they can terrorize each other while I make this video. Bottom line is you can do this several ways. Now, some people burn holes in here, and I prefer not to have burning plastic. I just think it's not good for you to breathe. So I like to use a drill, and I have a special drill bit that I use when I'm making holes in my pots, and that's the same drill bit I'm going to use here. So this is my Ryobi rechargeable drill, and then the drill bit is like a little spade. And that spade is going to allow you to make a hole in this container that's large enough. We want multiple holes in the container so that it drains appropriately. So what you're gonna do is just flip your container over and pop a few holes in. Okay, so we've got 5 good-sized holes in the bottom of this container. Now, what you want to do now is cut this container just below the handle. I have very sharp Fiskars scissors here. You need a very sharp knife to do this. If a child is doing this, they need to be supervised, or if you're clumsy, maybe you need to be supervised. But you're going to turn the container over on its side and punch a hole. And then you will then cut with your knife or with your scissors. And we're going to just cut a straight line. So we've got our container cut. You can see it's like open but hinged, and that's on purpose because we're going to tape this back together. The next thing you want to do is put something in the bottom of this to keep the soil from falling out. I prefer coffee filters, but you can repurpose newspaper for this, but I just find coffee filters are super easy. So I'm going to go grab one because I forgot. And through the magic of the internet, here is the coffee filters. You're just going to pop one of those down into the bottom of this, and then we're going to use potting soil. Now, could you use seed starting soil? Absolutely you could, but what we want is a potting mix. This is a soil-less mix. I like Pro Mix with my Corzai fungi. I have found that my plants really respond to this, but because these are going outside and then they're either going to be planted directly in the garden, or in this particular case, I'm going to be using these for our spring sale at Master Gardener. So we're going to pot them up. So we're just going to go ahead and go straight to potting soil. So I recommend you buy a good quality potting soil or you make your own. Seed starting soil is also an option, but I just prefer at this point, since we're going outside, that we're going to do the potting mix. So this is your seed packet. There's lots of really great instructions on your seed packet here. But what I want you to know is this particular seed needs light to generate. If you think about how milkweed seeds are distributed on little tiny fluffs, similar to the fluff of a dandelion, it is going to float and then land, and it's going to pretty much be on top of the soil. It's not going to bury itself under the soil. So we're going to mimic that as closely as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this up, coffee filters in the bottom, with about 4 inches of this potting mix. Now, once you've got this good and filled up, we're just going to press on it lightly. Now, I took the liberty of putting this into a trug, adding water, and then stirring it up. The potting mix, when it comes out of the bag, is really dry. And that's fine, but we want to make sure that we get it good and moist because we want to mimic the soil conditions that it's eventually going to have. So this is good and moist right now, but we will water it very well and let the water drain out before we put it outside. Now, it's a snowy day, so we're going to be putting it right into the snow today, which is completely fine. So here's my seeds. We're going to overseed this. The reason for that is we want to try to get as many going as we possibly can. Now, the good news is that, again, botanical interests test their seeds for viability. They don't just take the grower's word for it. And you can see these seeds are very tiny. So approximately 15 or 20 in the package is how many are in here. And we're just gonna sprinkle those over the top of the soil. Okay, we've got those really good on the top of the soil, but now we're just gonna lightly tamp them down. That way the soil is making good contact with the seed and it's more likely to sprout. Now, some people will take a tiny little bit of soil and sprinkle it over the top. Depends on the seed. In this particular seed, we don't need to do that. It needs sun to generate. So what we want to do is then label. Let me tell you folks, I have made this mistake. I will think I'm gonna remember what this is. I'm gonna be able to recognize it. When you have sown as many seeds that I have winter sown this year, there is no way you're gonna remember all of them. So we're going to label it not once, but twice. Once inside, so here what I've done is I've used a label maker. I really like the label makers because they don't fade. And then when this were to go into the garden, I can use this right straight in the garden if you want. I highly recommend investing in a label maker. And you're gonna put that right inside like so. If you don't wanna do the label maker, you need to buy a special pen. Now this is a garden marker. It's designed for UV. It's designed for the cold, wet weather we're having today. Or you can use a paint pen. Another option, use a pencil, but do not use a permanent marker. Guess what? It's not permanent outside. Ask me how I know. I didn't realize that. It's very important to get a UV-proof marker. So for us to be able to close this back together, I will tell you it's really helpful to have a helper when you're doing winter sowing, because this is the hardest part to do by yourself. So I usually tear myself a long strip. Now some people buy clear duct tape, that's fine, or packing tape. I don't really get too hung up on this part. I like this duct tape by Gorilla Tape, and you're going to get this closed back as good as you can. Now the reason why we close this up is we're trying to make like a little greenhouse effect, and we will in the spring be opening these up and then closing them again at night to allow excess heat out. But we want to make sure that cut that we made is completely covered, so we're going to do that. And then I also like to mark the date of when we're actually doing this sowing. So we're going to write on the outside what it is. Some people like to write on a piece of tape, put it on the bottom. Guess what? That's fine too. But just make sure that your container, you've removed as much of the label as you possibly can, because we want to let light in here. So in this particular case, we have butterfly weed, and today is the 25th of January. And we're good to go. Now, if you want to water this again, that's fine. I'm going to use the pretty cup that my friend's Botanical Interest sent me, and we're purposely going to flood this because we want the water to drip out the bottom. The potting mix that I am using is extremely dry. You will find that it is packed purposely to be able to ship it, and so it's packed very tight, and therefore it is very, very dry. So we want the water to drip out of here. That's why we flood this, so that it's nice and moist, not sopping wet, but enough that it will allow it to now let those seeds start thinking about growing. We're gonna put this outside today, and we will put it in a shady spot. We're going to allow it to get sun. We're going to allow it to get rained on, snowed on, but not direct sun. We don't want it to fry, because the temperature is definitely going to be in the spring up and down, and we don't want to cook those seeds. So make sure that where you're putting this container is in part shade. In my particular case, mine get afternoon shade, which is what the hottest part of the day, and they're sitting right out in one of my raised beds, so that way they don't flip over. If you have critters, you may need to cover this hole with some type of, one thing you could use is landscape fabric. Another thing you could use is like a mesh material, like a screen off a window. What that's going to prevent is it's going to prevent them from being able to get in and eating those seeds. Now in my particular case, I've never had that be an issue for me, but some people do. If you have mice or chipmunks, not a problem for me, but could be for you. Now, you will need to monitor this. Now, in my particular case, we've had a very wet winter so far. I've not had to water my containers at all. I can see the moisture building up inside. That's a very good sign. Another test is you can pick it up. You can fill, because I added that water, it's heavy. So it's good and moist, it's good to go. I don't need to do anything else. In fact, last year, I didn't water them once. So it's possible you might not have to if you're having a pretty wet winter and spring, or like today, snow. So I hope this video is helpful. What are you winter sowing? We're gonna put a link that's gonna show you all of the things that you could potentially winter sow. You don't just have to do natives, you could do all kinds of vegetables, annuals, perennials, flowers, you name it, you can definitely get them to grow. I also recommend, if you're on Facebook, to join the Winter Sowers group. My friend Stephanie Campbell, who starts thousands of seeds every year in using this technique, has a wonderful tutorial and lots of information that you can use for your own garden. Garden thoughtfully and take care.